All right, so today we're going to dig into something you've probably heard about, but maybe haven't seen all the pieces connected. It's this powerful and, really consistent pattern in the Trump administration's playbook. People call it maximum pressure. It is a super high stakes way of getting what you want, and we're going to break down exactly how it works and, more importantly, what it all means.
And that really brings us to the big question here, doesn't it? I mean, is this whole strategy some kind of masterclass in leverage? Is it actually working, successfully bending these huge institutions to the administration's will? Or is all the friction it's creating pushing things, maybe a little too close to a breaking point? Let's jump in and find out.
Okay, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll nail down what maximum pressure even is. Then we're going to look at it in action, on the world stage, on American streets, in the economy, and with big corporations. And then at the end, we'll pull it all together to see what the bigger picture looks like.
All right, first things first, the maximum pressure doctrine. Let's define our terms. What are we really talking about here?
Okay, so think of it like this. At its heart, it's about using overwhelming force. We're talking everything from military ships and economic sanctions to just really intense public language to basically force an opponent to give in. And you'll see in a minute that the word opponent gets used pretty broadly. I mean, we're talking about everyone from foreign countries to the mayors of American cities. So let's get into our first example. We're going to see how this plays out on the world stage, and we're starting with Iran. So the U.S. sent what's literally been called a massive armada over to the Middle East. And we're not just talking about a couple of ships here. This is the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Group. It's basically a floating fortress with 65 aircraft, destroyers, the whole shebang. The official goal? To use this incredible show of force to pressure Iran into a brand new nuclear deal. And that pressure is backed up by some pretty serious threats of an attack that would be far worse than anything they've seen before. And how did Iran respond? Well, it was fast. And frankly, it was chilling. An advisor to the supreme leader came right out and said that any U.S. military move would be considered, and I'm quoting here, the hashtag start of war. I mean, this is not your typical diplomatic chess game. This is real-time brinkmanship. It just goes to show you how incredibly high the stakes get when you apply this kind of pressure on the world stage. Okay, so let's shift gears now. We're going to bring this whole idea back home, from the global stage right down to American streets. Our next case study is all about a federal operation in Minneapolis and what looks a lot like a strange game of musical chairs. So here's what happened step by step. Federal agents shot and killed a U.S. citizen, an ICU nurse named Alex Pretty. The public reaction was huge. I mean, even Fox News was covering the backlash pretty intensely. But instead of backing down, the administration just switched out the players. The guy in charge on the ground was replaced by border tard Tom Homan, and those big, visible street sweeps, suddenly they were being called targeted operations. See what they did? The pressure was still on, but they were carefully managing how it looked. And this is a perfect example of the rhetorical part of this whole doctrine, right? Even as the tactics on the ground changed to look better, the direct pressure on local leaders got even more intense. The mayor of Minneapolis was told out loud for everyone to hear that he was playing with fire for not helping out. The message couldn't be clearer. Get on board, or you'll regret it. Now, this strategy isn't just about ships and soldiers or agents on the street. It's also being aimed right at the heart of the economy, at independent institutions, and even the way global trade works. Let's look at the Federal Reserve, for instance. President Trump went public and demanded, not suggested, but demanded, that the Fed cut interest rates by a whopping 3 percentage points. Now, you have to understand, this is a huge deal. It's a really direct, very public way of putting pressure on an institution that is specifically designed to be independent of politics. And this leads to a really fascinating, honestly, a kind of bizarre side effect of all this economic pressure. Get this. In a single year, the Irish economy was both the fastest growing in Europe and it fell into a technical recession. How on earth is that even possible? Well, here's why. It turns out that giant multinational companies, especially in the pharma industry, got so worried about the threat of new tariffs that they basically shipped an entire year's worth of their products in just the first 6 months. So you get this huge, totally artificial boom, which is then followed by a sudden bust once all the warehouses were stuffed to the gills. Think about that. The talk of maximum pressure, just the threat alone, was enough to throw an entire country's economy for a loop. Okay, for our last example, let's look at how this whole pressure dynamic shows up in the corporate world. And we're going to do it by looking at a very strange movie deal.
So, Amazon shelled out $40 million for a documentary about Melania Trump. $40 million. Now, to put that in perspective, their biggest rival, Disney, only offered $14 million. That means Amazon paid almost 3 times more. You've got to ask yourself, why pay so much for a documentary? It's an extraordinary amount of money, and it definitely raises some eyebrows.
Unsurprisingly, the deal got a lot of heat. A lot of critics, including some big names in media, looked at it and didn't see a normal movie deal at all. They saw what they called a bribe, a way for Amazon to maybe get on the good side of the administration, which, by the way, was in charge of huge government contracts that Amazon's other businesses really rely on.
And when you look at the numbers, you can see why people were so suspicious. The movie they spent $40 million to buy was only projected to make about $1 million in its opening weekend at the box office. When you have a gap that massive between what you paid and what you expect to make, well, it really makes you wonder if making a profit was ever the main point.
So, okay, we've looked at Iran, Minneapolis, the Fed, and this Amazon deal. Now it's time to take a step back and connect the dots. Let's lay out the entire maximum pressure playbook. Yeah, when you lay it all out like this, a really clear pattern starts to emerge. You've got military brinkmanship, like we saw with Iran. You have controlling the optics, like changing the people in charge in Minneapolis. There's targeting independent institutions like the Fed, leveraging the family brand to create situations where a company might want to, get in good. And finally, just using threats and rhetoric as a weapon so powerful it can warp global trade. It's not just one thing, it's a strategy on multiple fronts at once.
And that brings us right back to where we started. But now we have a whole lot more to think about. So, what is this maximum pressure doctrine? Is it some kind of brilliant, out-of-the-box strategy for getting things done? Or is applying this much force in so many different places at the same time just creating a dangerous amount of instability, something that could, easily spiral out of control? That really is the central question here.